I didn't think a single sentence could ruin everything, but when I called him my backup plan, his face froze, and then he walked out. I thought he'd be back in a day or two. Turns out, I was wrong. The argument started over something stupid. What else is new? I can't even remember exactly what triggered it. Maybe it was the dishes left in the sink or the way he'd been quiet during dinner. The details blur together now, but I remember how I felt. Frustrated, cornered, tired of the same stagnant routine. We were in the living room. I was still in my work clothes, heels kicked off, a glass of red wine half finished on the coffee table. He stood across from me, arms crossed, wearing that damn plaid shirt he always wore when he was being serious. He was asking me questions, pressing me about our relationship, about the future. And I was defensive, irritated. "You know, sometimes it feels like I'm just a placeholder for you," he said, his voice calm but trembling slightly, the way it always did when he was holding back something bigger. I should have stopped right there. I should have taken a breath, walked away, or even lied. But no, instead, I snapped. "A placeholder? Are you serious? Do you think I have that many options left at my age?" I shot back, my voice dripping with sarcasm. He flinched, but I didn't stop. I was on a roll, words spilling out of me like water from a broken dam. "If we're being honest, what do you think this is? Do you think I chose you because you're my dream guy? God, I've already lived through the heartbreaks, the cheaters, the narcissists. I chose you because you're stable, reliable, a backup plan, okay? Someone I could settle with." The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. I saw his expression shift, shock, hurt, and then something darker. Something final. "Wow," he said after a long pause. "Good to know how you really feel." "Wait, that's not what I meant," I said quickly, panic starting to rise in my chest. But the damage was done. He didn't yell. He didn't throw anything or storm out dramatically. That's not who he is. Instead, he walked to the door, grabbed his coat, and paused for just a moment. "I'll never be anyone's second choice," he said quietly. Then he closed the door behind him. I stood there, barefoot on the cold floor, staring at the door like he was going to walk back in. He always came back. We'd had fights before. Stupid, petty arguments that felt huge in the moment, but blew over in a day or two. That's what I told myself as I sat down on the couch, finishing the rest of the wine in one long gulp. The next morning I woke up to find his side of the bed still empty. I checked my phone, no messages. When I went to the kitchen, I saw a note on the counter. It was short and to the point. "You were right. You deserve more than a placeholder, and I deserve someone who doesn't see me as one. Take care." It wasn't angry or spiteful. It was worse. It was calm, decisive, like he'd already made up his mind. For the first few days, I pretended I didn't care. I went to work, plastered on my usual professional smile, and told myself he'd come crawling back eventually. He always did. He'd realize I didn't mean it, that I'd just said it in the heat of the moment. But days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months, and the silence from him was deafening. I kept telling myself that I was fine, that I was better off without him. But every time I walked past his favorite coffee mug sitting untouched on the shelf, or saw his shampoo still in the shower, I felt this dull, gnawing ache in my chest. I thought about texting him, but I didn't know what to say. "I'm sorry" didn't feel like enough, and "I didn't mean it" would have been a lie. Deep down, I knew I'd meant every word. That's what made it worse. Because the truth is, he was my backup plan. I'd settled for him, not because I loved him, but because I was tired of being alone. I'd spent my 30s chasing the wrong men, pouring my heart into people who never deserved it. By the time I met him, I was exhausted. He was safe, he was kind, and I thought that would be enough. But now that he was gone, all I could think about were the little things I'd taken for granted. The way he'd leave sticky notes on the fridge with dumb jokes just to make me laugh. The way he always remembered how I liked my coffee, even though I changed it every few months. The way he'd hold me at night, his hand resting on the small of my back, like he was afraid I'd slip away. It wasn't until I saw him again, months later, that the full weight of what I'd lost hit me. But by then, it was too late. Too late to take back what I said. Too late to fix what I'd broken. And the worst part? He wasn't alone. The first night after he left, I convinced myself it wasn't a big deal. He'd walk it off, spend the night at a friend's place, and come back once he cooled down. That's what I told myself as I made dinner for one and tried not to notice how quiet the apartment felt without him. I scrolled mindlessly through my phone, flipping between apps, pretending I wasn't waiting for a text or a call. By midnight, the silence started getting to me. I poured another glass of wine, stared at the note he'd left, and read it again. You were right. You deserve more than a placeholder, and I deserve someone who doesn't see me as one. Take care. I hated how calm it sounded, how final, like he wasn't even angry, just done. The next morning I woke up to an empty apartment, his side of the bed untouched. The realization that he hadn't come back hit me harder than I expected. I didn't want to admit it, not to myself, not to anyone, but the first crack of regret had already started forming. Still, I told myself I was fine. I put on my usual work outfit, tailored black pants, a silk blouse, and my favorite heels. My armor. At the office, I was confident, untouchable, a senior real estate agent with years of experience and a Rolodex full of high-profile clients. I threw myself into work, scheduling back-to-back meetings and avoiding my phone like it might bite me. But even with the distractions, he was everywhere. At lunch, I reached for my phone to text him before remembering I had nothing to say. During meetings, my mind wandered to the way he used to text me during the day. Little things like, "Don't forget to eat," or "Good luck with that cranky client." And when I got home that evening, the sight of his empty mug on the counter made my stomach twist. Still, I told myself it was for the best. I didn't need him. I was strong, independent, and perfectly capable of moving on. But that didn't stop the dreams. The dreams started a few nights after he left. At first, they were harmless, just flashes of memories, moments we'd shared. I'd wake up feeling disoriented, his name lingering on my lips. One night, I dreamed about the first time we met. It was at a coffee shop. I'd been running late for a meeting, fumbling with my laptop bag and nearly spilling my latte. He'd held the door open for me, smiling in that easy, unassuming way he had. "You look like you're about to take on the world," he'd said, glancing at my power suit and the stack of files I was carrying. "And you look like you're about to block my way." I'd shot back, annoyed and flustered. But he'd just laughed, stepping aside with a mock bow. "Fair enough," he said. "Good luck out there, boss lady." I hadn't thought much of him at the time. He was just a guy, friendly, good-looking, but not the type I usually went for. But fate had other plans. 2 weeks later, I ran into him at a networking event. Something about the way he carried himself, confident but not cocky, approachable but not overly eager, made me give him a chance. The memories haunted me. The way he used to rub my shoulders after a long day, his thumbs finding every knot of tension. The nights we spent curled up on the couch, his arm around me as we binge-watched some trashy reality show. The way he'd kiss the back of my neck in the mornings, even when I was grumpy and half asleep. I missed him. But I wasn't ready to admit it. Instead, I doubled down on my defenses, replaying the argument in my head like a bad movie. He was overreacting, I told myself. Everyone says things they don't mean during a fight. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. I hadn't just said it to hurt him. I'd said it because it was true. 2 weeks after he left, I finally broke down and texted him. "Hey, can we talk?" I stared at the screen, waiting for those little dots to appear. They never did. I tried again the next day. "I'm sorry about what I said, I didn't mean it." Still nothing. The silence was unbearable. I started checking his social media, something I'd never done before. His Facebook was private, and his Instagram was almost empty. Just a few pictures of sunsets and his dog, who he'd taken with him when he left. The only update was a photo he posted a week after he left. It was a shot of a hiking trail, captioned "Finding Peace." I hated it. I hated how calm and content he seemed while I was falling apart. By the 3rd week, I started to unravel. I spent my nights pacing the apartment, the quiet stretching out like a suffocating blanket. I kept expecting him to walk through the door, to call, to at least text back. But the longer the silence dragged on, the more I realized he wasn't coming back. And the worst part? I didn't blame him. Because if I were in his shoes, I wouldn't come back either. That realization hit me like a punch to the gut. For the first time, I let myself really think about what I'd said to him that night. A backup plan. The words echoed in my head. Cruel and cutting. He'd given me everything, his time, his kindness, his patience, and I'd reduced him to a safety net. I thought about all the times he'd been there for me, even when I didn't deserve it. Like the time my boss reamed me out in front of the entire office, and I came home fuming. He didn't try to fix it or offer advice. He just listened, handing me a glass of wine and letting me vent until I ran out of steam. Or the time I got food poisoning after a business trip, and he stayed up all night taking care of me, holding my hair back and rubbing my back while I threw up everything I'd eaten in the last 24 hours. He deserved better. And for the first time, I started to wonder if he knew that long before I did. By the end of the month, the cracks in my armor were impossible to hide. I avoided my coworkers, skipped happy hours, and stopped answering calls from friends. I couldn't face their questions, their pity, or their well-meaning advice. Instead, I stayed home, staring at the blank space where his things used to be and wondering if I'd ever feel whole again. But deep down, I already knew the answer. He was gone. And it was my fault. The loneliness didn't hit all at once. It crept in, like a slow leak in a sinking ship. At first, I thought I was doing fine, going to work, keeping up appearances, and telling myself that I didn't need him. But the cracks started to show in the quiet moments. It was the nights that were the worst. The silence in the apartment became unbearable. I used to complain about how he snored, how his side of the bed always seemed warmer than mine, but now, the emptiness felt like a punishment. I'd find myself staring at his empty side of the bed, wondering if he was sleeping as soundly as I wasn't. One night, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the couch, scrolling through my phone. My thumb hovered over his name and my contacts list. I wanted to call him, to hear his voice, to beg for forgiveness, if that's what it took. But I didn't. Because what would I say? That I was sorry? That I didn't mean it? Both of those were lies. The truth was, I did mean it. He was my backup plan. And even as I sat there drowning in regret, I knew I hadn't chosen him out of love. I'd chosen him because he was safe. But now that safety was gone, and I was left with the mess I'd made, work became my refuge, the one place where I could pretend to be in control. I threw myself into my job, taking on more clients than I could handle, and volunteering for every project that came my way. I work as a senior real estate agent for a high-end firm, dealing with multi-million-dollar properties and demanding clients who expected perfection. It was a high-stress environment, but I was good at it. I'd built a reputation as the woman who could close any deal, charm any client, and make impossible things happen. But even at work, the cracks started to show. One day I was giving a tour of a luxury penthouse to a wealthy couple when I spotted something that made my stomach twist. A framed photo of the couple on their wedding day. They looked so happy, so in love, and for a brief moment, I couldn't breathe. "Are you okay?" the husband asked, his brow furrowed in concern. "Fine," I said, forcing a smile. "Just got a little lightheaded, must have skipped breakfast." I finished the tour, made the sale, and went back to my office, where I locked the door and cried for the first time in weeks. The flashbacks started coming more frequently after that. I remembered the night he told me he loved me for the first time. We were sitting on the balcony of my apartment, sharing a bottle of wine. It was late, and the city lights glittered in the distance. "I know this might be too soon," he said, his voice soft, "but I need you to know, I love you." I didn't say it back. Instead, I smiled, kissed him, and said, "Thank you." Looking back, I wonder if that was the first crack in our relationship. He never brought it up again, but I could see it in his eyes sometimes. That flicker of doubt, like he wasn't sure where he stood with me. As the weeks turned into months, I started to reflect on the relationships that had brought me to this point. I'd spent most of my 30s chasing after the wrong men, handsome, charming, successful types who made me feel like I was living in a romantic movie. But those relationships never lasted. They always ended in heartbreak, betrayal, or disappointment. There was Eric, the finance executive who cheated on me with his assistant. There was Luke, the aspiring artist who drained my bank account and then ghosted me. And then there was Adam, the one I thought might be the one. Until he decided that commitment wasn't really his thing. By the time I hit my 40s, I was tired. Tired of dating, tired of hoping, tired of pouring myself into relationships that left me empty. So when I met him, my backup plan, I told myself I was done chasing fairy tales. He wasn't the man of my dreams, but he was solid, dependable, and kind. He treated me well, and I thought that would be enough. But now, sitting alone in an empty apartment, I realized how cruel that was. I'd chosen him not because I loved him, but because I thought he was safe. One night, after another long day at work, I found myself sitting in the dark, scrolling through old photos on my phone. There was one of us at the beach, taken during a weekend getaway. He was grinning at the camera, his hair messy from the wind, his arm wrapped around me. I remembered how happy he'd been that day, how he'd insisted on getting ice cream even though it was freezing cold. And then there was a video from my birthday last year. He'd surprised me with dinner reservations at my favorite restaurant and a necklace I'd mentioned in passing months earlier. I'd barely said thank you. The loneliness started to eat away at me in ways I didn't expect. I stopped going out with friends, stopped answering their calls and texts. I told myself I was too busy with work, but the truth was, I couldn't bear the thought of facing their questions. What happened between you two? Have you heard from him? Are you okay? I wasn't okay. But I didn't know how to say that without sounding pathetic. Instead, I threw myself into distractions. I redecorated the apartment, rearranging furniture and buying new decorations in an attempt to make the space feel less empty. I started working out again, telling myself it was for my health, but secretly hoping it would make me feel attractive, desirable. Like I wasn't just a woman in her 40s watching her life fall apart. But no matter what I did, the ache didn't go away. The worst part was the guilt. Every time I thought about what I'd said to him, I felt like I'd swallowed broken glass. You're my backup plan. The words haunted me, echoing in my head at the most inconvenient times, during meetings, on the subway, in the middle of the night when I couldn't sleep. I'd taken him for granted, assumed he'd always be there, no matter how badly I treated him. But now that he was gone, I realized just how much he'd given me. And the worst part? I wasn't sure if I missed him because I loved him, or because I hated being alone. By the end of the third month, the loneliness had turned into something darker. I started checking his social media obsessively, looking for any clue about what he was doing or who he was with. I told myself it was harmless, just curiosity. But deep down, I knew I was looking for something, anything, to prove he missed me as much as I missed him. But every time I came up empty, the ache in my chest grew sharper. He was moving on, and I was still stuck, drowning in the silence he left behind. It was a Saturday afternoon, 3 months after he walked out of my life, when I saw him again. I wasn't looking for him. Honestly, I'd been doing everything I could to avoid any place where I might run into him. But fate, or maybe karma, had other plans. I was at a cafe downtown, one I used to frequent before everything went to hell. I'd been trying to treat myself, convincing myself that a latte and a good book could somehow fill the void he'd left. The place was busy, filled with the hum of conversations and the clinking of cups. I had just settled into a corner table when I heard a laugh. His laugh. At first, I thought I was imagining it. It had been so long since I'd heard that sound, soft, low, and unmistakably his. My stomach twisted as I glanced up, scanning the room, and then I saw him. He was sitting at a table near the window, leaning forward slightly, his elbows resting on the table. And he wasn't alone. She was sitting across from him, a young woman, no older than 25. Her hair was long and sleek, the glossy perfection that belongs on shampoo commercials. She was wearing a sundress, all bright colors and delicate straps, and she was laughing at something he'd just said. I froze. He looked happy, relaxed. His shoulders weren't hunched the way they used to be when we were together, and there was a lightness in his expression that I barely recognized. It was like seeing a stranger wearing his face. I couldn't stop staring. She leaned across the table, touching his hand lightly as she said something I couldn't hear. He didn't pull away. Instead, he smiled, a warm, genuine smile I hadn't seen in months. And that's when it hit me. He was thriving. Without me. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I barely remember paying for my coffee or how I made it home. All I could see was the image of him with her. Her youthful glow, her effortless beauty, the way he looked at her like she was the only thing in the room. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in the dark, replaying the scene over and over in my head. My emotions were a tangled mess of jealousy, anger, and something I wasn't ready to name. Part of me wanted to hate her. She was everything I wasn't. Young, carefree, and unburdened by the baggage of past relationships. She didn't have the scars I carried, the walls I'd built, or the cynicism that came with age. But the other part of me, maybe the more honest part, knew it wasn't her fault. She wasn't the problem. I was. A few weeks later, I saw them again. This time, it was at a gallery opening. My coworker had dragged me along, insisting it would be good for me to get out of the house and meet new people. I'd been hesitant, but eventually, I gave in. I should have known he'd be there. The gallery was packed, the air filled with the low hum of conversation and the clink of champagne glasses. I was standing near a sculpture, half listening to my coworker ramble about some potential client when I saw them walk in. She was on his arm, looking impossibly elegant in a black dress that clung to her in all the right places. He was wearing a suit, dark, tailored, and far more expensive than anything he'd ever worn when we were together. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. They moved through the room like they belonged there, pausing to chat with other guests. She laughed easily, her hand resting lightly on his arm, and I felt a pang of something sharp and bitter in my chest. I told myself I didn't care. But when she leaned in to whisper something in his ear and he laughed, that same laugh that used to belong to me, I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. Later that night, I couldn't stop myself. I texted him, "I saw you tonight. You looked good." I stared at my phone, waiting for a response. My heart was pounding, my hands shaking slightly as I clutched the device like it was a lifeline. He replied an hour later, "Thanks, it was nice seeing you too." That was it. No invitation to talk, no opening to fix what I'd broken. Just a polite, distant response that felt like a slap in the face. The weeks that followed were a special kind of torture. Everywhere I went, I felt like I was haunted by the ghost of our relationship. The places we used to go, the songs we used to listen to, the little routines that had once felt so mundane, all of it was laced with his absence. And then there was her, the girl. I couldn't stop thinking about her. The way she looked, the way she laughed, the way she seemed to fit into his life so effortlessly. I started spiraling, obsessing over every detail. Was she smarter than me? Prettier? Did she make him happier than I ever could? The questions gnawed at me, keeping me awake at night. One day, I finally broke. I was scrolling through social media, torturing myself with photos of them together, smiling at a winery, hiking in the mountains, attending some charity gala, when I noticed something odd. The comments under the photos were strange. A few were from women I didn't recognize, all saying similar things. "You deserve the best. Don't let anyone take advantage of your kindness. Be careful, sweetie." At first, I dismissed it as harmless fluff, just friends being supportive. But the more I scrolled, the more I noticed a pattern. There was something almost protective about the tone of the comments, like they were warning him. And then I saw it. A tag. One of the comments had tagged another profile, one I didn't recognize. I clicked on it, my curiosity getting the better of me. What I found stopped me cold. The profile belonged to her, his new girl. And buried in her old photos, hidden among the glamorous shots of vacations, parties, and designer handbags, was a picture that told me everything I needed to know. It was her, standing next to another man. He looked older, wealthy, and unmistakably familiar. He was her ex. And judging by the date on the photo, it hadn't been that long since they'd broken up. I sat back, my mind racing. I didn't know what to do with this information. Confront him? Warn him? Or stay quiet and let him figure it out on his own? Part of me wanted to tell myself it wasn't my problem. He'd moved on, and so should I. But the other part, the part of me that still cared, that still missed him, couldn't let it go. Because as much as I hated to admit it, a small, selfish part of me wanted to see him hurt. Wanted to see her fail. Wanted him to come back. And for the first time in months, I realized I wasn't sure if I was hoping for his happiness or waiting for his downfall. It was a Friday night when everything came to a head. My coworker Jenna had convinced me to go to a charity gala at one of the upscale hotels downtown. She'd sold it as a networking opportunity, but I knew the real reason. She thought I needed to get out there again. I almost didn't go. The thought of smiling through meaningless small talk while pretending my life wasn't falling apart sounded like torture. But something made me say yes. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the faint hope that I might see him again, even though I knew how much it would hurt. As soon as I walked into the ballroom, I regretted it. The room was packed with polished, glamorous people sipping champagne and exchanging fake smiles. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over everything, and the air smelled faintly of roses and expensive perfume. I felt out of place, like I didn't belong there anymore. And then I saw him. He was standing near the bar, holding a glass of whiskey. Even from across the room, I could tell he looked good. Too good. His suit fit him perfectly. His hair was styled just right, and he had this air of confidence about him that I didn't remember from before. And of course, she was with him. She was draped in a red dress that hugged her curves like it was made just for her. Her lips were painted the same shade of red, and her hair fell in loose waves around her shoulders. She looked like something out of a magazine. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. They hadn't seen me yet, and I debated leaving before they did. But something stopped me. Call it pride. Call it jealousy. Call it whatever you want. But I couldn't walk away. Not yet. I grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and made my way toward the bar, my heels clicking against the marble floor. I told myself I wasn't doing this to cause a scene. I just wanted to say hi, to show him I was fine, that I wasn't sitting at home crying over him. But as I got closer, I saw something that made my stomach twist. She was leaning into him, her hand resting lightly on his chest as she whispered something in his ear. He laughed, a deep, genuine laugh, and I felt my blood boil. I didn't think. I just acted. Wow, I said, my voice louder than I intended. Don't you two look perfect together? They both turned to look at me. His eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing his face, before he masked it with a polite smile. She, on the other hand, looked me up and down with thinly veiled disdain. Well, if it isn't the woman of the hour, she said, her tone dripping with sweetness that didn't match the look in her eyes. I've heard so much about you. I forced a smile, ignoring the way her words made my chest tighten. And you must be. What was your name again? Her smile faltered for a split second before she recovered. Victoria, she said smoothly, extending a perfectly manicured hand. I didn't take it. Instead, I turned to him. You look good, I said, my voice softer now. So do you, he said, his tone careful, like he wasn't sure where this was going. The tension between the three of us was palpable. I could feel Victoria watching me, her eyes sharp and calculating. She was younger, prettier, and clearly confident in her position by his side, but there was something else in her gaze, something guarded. So, I said, turning my attention back to her. How long have you two been seeing each other? Not long, she said with a coy smile, slipping her arm through his. But when you know, right? I wanted to scream. Instead, I took a sip of my champagne, the bubbles stinging my throat. That's wonderful, I said, my voice tight. I'm sure you're both very happy. His jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought he might say something. But he didn't. As the night went on, I couldn't stop watching them. They were the perfect couple. Laughing, mingling, and drawing the attention of everyone around them. But the more I watched, the more I noticed little things. The way she seemed to cling to him, like she needed to prove something. The way he smiled at her, but not quite the way he used to smile at me. And then there were the whispers. Quiet, barely audible, but just loud enough for me to pick up bits and pieces. Do you think she knows? One woman murmured to another as they walked past me. She's not here for him, the other replied. Trust me. By the time dessert was served, I'd had enough. I made my way toward the terrace, desperate for some air. The cool night breeze hit me as soon as I stepped outside, and I leaned against the railing, trying to steady my racing heart. I thought I was alone until I heard footsteps behind me. You always did hate crowded rooms, he said. I turned to find him standing there, his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. Old habits die hard, I guess, I said, my voice softer now. We stood there in silence for a moment, the city lights twinkling in the distance. Why are you here? He finally asked. I could ask you the same thing, I said, turning to face him. But I think we both know the answer. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Look, I didn't come here to rub anything in your face. Didn't you? I shot back, my voice sharper than I intended, because that's sure what it feels like. That's not fair, he said, his tone calm but firm. You're the one who ended this, remember? You made it clear what I was to you. His words hit me like a punch to the gut, and for a moment I couldn't speak. I didn't mean it, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. You know I didn't mean it. Do I? He said, his gaze piercing. Because it sure sounded like you did. The conversation stretched on, raw and unfiltered. We rehashed everything, the fight, the aftermath, the months of silence. I wanted to tell him everything, that I missed him, that I still loved him, that I'd give anything to take it all back. But before I could, the terrace door opened, and Victoria stepped out. There you are, she said, her voice light but her eyes sharp. I was starting to think you'd run off. He glanced at her, then back at me. And in that moment, I saw the choice he had to make. I should go, he said finally, his voice quiet. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. As he walked away, Victoria shot me a look over her shoulder. A look that said, I've won, and maybe she had. But as I stood there alone on the terrace, watching them disappear into the crowd, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end. That night, I went home to an apartment that felt colder than ever. The conversation on the terrace played on a loop in my head, each word a weight that pressed down on my chest. You're the one who ended this. It sure sounded like you meant it. He was right, of course. I had ended it. Not that night on the terrace, not even the night he walked out. I'd ended it long before, in the way I treated him, in the way I thought about him. I hadn't realized it at the time, but I'd been slowly chipping away at the foundation of our relationship for months, maybe even years. And now, he was gone. The next few days passed in a haze. I went through the motions at work, plastering on the same polished smile I always wore, but underneath I was unraveling. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together. Her perfect red dress, his easy smile, the way they looked at each other like they belonged in a world I was no longer a part of. I couldn't help myself. That night, I opened her Instagram again, scrolling through her photos with a glass of wine in hand. The comments I'd noticed before still nagged at me, tugging at the edges of my mind. Be careful, sweetie. You deserve better. Don't let anyone take advantage of your kindness. Something wasn't right. I clicked back to the photo of her and the older man, the one I now realized was her ex. There was a caption beneath it. Some people don't deserve second chances, but I'm stronger now. #moving on. I stared at it for a long time, the pieces slowly falling into place. Her ex wasn't just a random part of her past, he was a warning sign. And now I couldn't shake the feeling that she was using him, my him, the same way I had. A week later, I got my confirmation. I was at work when I got a text from Jenna. It was a screenshot of a message she'd received from one of her friends, a woman who worked in PR and ran in the same social circles as Victoria. The message was simple. You didn't hear it from me, but Victoria's new boyfriend is loaded, and she's already bragging about how she's going to help him manage his money. The implication was clear. I felt a sick kind of satisfaction at first. A part of me, the petty, vindictive part, wanted to send him the screenshot immediately. I wanted to tell him, see, I'm not the only one who saw you as a backup plan. But then I stopped. Because the truth was, it wasn't my place anymore. That weekend, I went for a walk to clear my head. The air was crisp and cold, the first hints of winter creeping in, and the city streets were bustling with people going about their lives. I found myself wandering toward the park near his old apartment. We used to come here on weekends, grabbing coffee from the little cafe on the corner, and sitting on the benches to watch the world go by. I sat down on one of those benches, letting the memories wash over me. I thought about all the times he'd been there for me. The little gestures, the quiet ways he'd shown he cared. I thought about the arguments, the laughter, the nights we'd stayed up talking about everything and nothing. And I thought about the moment I lost him. Not the night he walked out, not even the night of the gala, but the moment I decided he wasn't enough. That was the moment everything changed. I stayed there for hours, watching the sunlight fade into twilight. When I finally got up to leave, I made a decision. I wouldn't send him the screenshot. I wouldn't try to save him from her, no matter how much I wanted to. He was happy. Or at least he seemed happy, and I didn't have the right to take that away from him. But I couldn't let go completely. When I got home, I sat down at my desk and wrote him a letter. Not a text, not an email, a real, handwritten letter. In it, I told him everything. I told him I was sorry. Not just for the words I said that night, but for the way I'd treated him throughout our relationship. I told him I missed him, that I regretted not appreciating him when I had the chance. And then I told him the truth. I told him about the photo I'd found, the comments I'd seen, the message Jenna had sent me. I didn't frame it as an accusation or a warning, just as a piece of information he could do with as he pleased. When I finished, I folded the letter carefully and placed it in an envelope. But I didn't mail it right away. For the next few days, I carried the letter with me, unsure if I had the courage to actually send it. One night, I found myself standing outside his building, the envelope clutched in my hand. I stared at the door for what felt like an eternity, debating whether to leave it in his mailbox or turn around and walk away. In the end, I slipped it through the mail slot and left without looking back. Weeks passed, and I didn't hear from him. Part of me had expected that, hoped for it even. I didn't write the letter to get him back. I wrote it because I needed to let go. But then one evening, I came home to find an envelope waiting for me. It was simple, just a single sheet of paper with his handwriting on it. Thank you for your honesty. I'm not sure what I'll do with the information, but I appreciate you telling me. Take care of yourself. That was it. No anger, no accusations, no promises of reconciliation. Just a quiet acknowledgement of what we'd shared and the finality of what we'd lost. In the weeks that followed, I felt lighter. The ache in my chest didn't go away entirely, but it dulled into something more bearable. I started going out with friends again, picking up hobbies I'd abandoned, and slowly rebuilding the pieces of my life. And though I still thought about him from time to time, it was different now. Because for the first time, I wasn't holding on to the past, I was letting it go. A few months later, I heard through the grapevine that he and Victoria had broken up. I didn't know the details, and I didn't ask. All I knew was that he deserved better, and so did I.